all those aspects right now. We will mostly focus on mapping aspects and what sort of things are very much required when we are mapping, especially in terms of structural data and other things. This lecture should have been done in field directly itself. It's not at all a thing which should be done on a web. However, we cannot. We all know that what's the problem is there. Okay, now as we know that sedimentation, what it starts with is actually a sediment starts to be generated from positive relief areas. Positive relief means from say mountains. Their weathering and erosion will be happening, and through various processes, it will reach up to a negative relief, that is some basin. We all know these basins are there, and through various processes of compaction, diagenesis, leading to lithification, we ultimately get the sedimentary package. Now, notice that as on Earth's surface, whatever these basins are there, we understand that the sedimentary rocks or units which have been deposited, they will be horizontal to sub-horizontal, because there is an angle of repose beyond which if sediments, if you go on depositing, they'll start to slide down. So we cannot think of a very tilted uh, bed of a sedimentary unit to have been deposited like that. So in general, we understand that should be a horizontal or sub-horizontal uh, stratification where the sediments would have deposited over one over another. Next, please. Now, these sedimentary or sediments will be having number of structures over them. Here I am talking about those of the can be primary or say secondary both. So you can basically classify them to be something which is prior to lithification. That is, these are soft sediment deformation, which we all know they are commonly called also as penny-contemporaneous deformation. And these are the processes which are very much active before the rock was lithified. To understand the origin of these structures, the basic principles of the soil mechanics are very important, or they're rather appropriate, rather than that of the rock mechanics, because they're unconsolidated sediments. So, as hello, any problem?
I request all to please mute.
Okay. So, as such, the rock mechanics principles will not be applying here when you are talking about the structures which are prior to lithification, because they're unconsolidated. Once these sediments have been consolidated, you can very well apply the rock mechanic principles like those of the elasticity, fracturing, then crystal plasticity, which is basically of ductile regime, to understand the origin of those structures. Now, these structures, as I was discussing with you, and the topic of presentation itself is there, that how we are going to use these structures in mapping aspect, that is sedimentary mapping. And obviously, mapping doesn't always mean that you are going to create a map only. Mapping also means that you need to understand its overall genesis and their fundamentals behind their origin. So, therefore, a sedimentologist has to be very much conversant with all these aspects of rock and soil deformations, because all these things you are going to get it in terms of, say, syn sedimentary deformation and also in post lithification deformations. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. Now, when we are mapping sedimentary terrain, these are very primary things that we study in our BSc first year itself. That which is very much governed by the Steno's law of superposition, or very famously called as principles of superposition. That is, each of the bed of a stratified sequence is younger than the underlying bed. So this particular law, or say the principle rather, is very much important in sedimentary terrains. But notice that in a normal sequence, that is where the deformation has not taken place, this principle is very easily understood in the field. But if your terrain is having some deformation, say it's a, suppose it's a fold and a thrust belt, or simply say in a terrain there are some faults have happened, say normal faults have developed, like those of the Gondwana basins. What you will be seeing that mostly they are undeformed. You'll be seeing them to be very horizontal bedded, but in between you will be encountering number of faults in between, and these faults have actually displaced them. So until and unless we are not able to understand the structure of these structures, we may get confused and may give out some error during this mapping exercise. So mapping as such, when we talk about the principle of superposition, it's basically a stratigraphy actually. You are going to build up the stratigraphy by using this principle, whether it is deformed or undeformed. Next, please. Okay. Now, these, this principle basically, which is going to happen in basins, as I was talking in the initial stage itself, that basins will be developing in different type of setups. It can be foreland, rift type, or intracontinental, or say passive margin type. Notice that in each of these types, some sort of deformations will be happening in terms of, say, faulting, or say development of host and graben, or sinking of the, due to the heat which is developed because of the igneous activities in the bottom part. They can even generate faults, and these structures, along these structures, basins will be the sediments will be depositing. These are some of the mechanisms by which sedimentary basins can develop. You can notice in the top left corner, that is crustal thinning, mantle lithosphere thickening, sedimentary or volcanic loading, tectonic loading. There are different types of basins have been discussed here. However, the latter tectonic activities which are going to accommodate their stretches by deforming the sedimentary rocks, that is after the lithification of the rocks, whatever the deformations which are happening in the sedimentary rocks will also be guided by the rheological property of those sediments. Now we will discuss it in more detail about the rheology, because they will also be guiding whether where in certain parts you will be getting different type of structure, and in nearby in a different rock you will be getting a different structure. That will be due to the rheological contrast. Next, please. Now, when we do a mapping in a sedimentary terrain, as such, when you see most of the India is almost been mapped out, at least first generation mapping has been done, and overall idea, or say the rock contacts have been nearly been very nicely been taken up by the GSI stalwarts already. If a sandstone is there, you will definitely be getting it as a sandstone having a contact with, say, limestone or a shale. That's okay. But whether some mistakes have happened or not, or say whether some concepts have been applied there or not, it all depends upon different whether which type of geologist has doing that exercise. However, in doing the mapping exercise in a sedimentary basin, this is one of the very important aspect which is called the way up structure. That is, which direction the younging up is there. As the Steno law says, that the older rocks will be underlying and the younger rocks will be overlying. This sequence will be very much correct in an undeformed terrain, and this sequence you can define by using these type of primary sedimentary structures, which is also called as way-up structures. As you can notice, there are a number of structures there like cross bedding, graded bedding, slump structures, convolute bedding, groove cast, flute cast. These are all your tool marks. Then load cast, ball and pillow, some fossil fillings or mud cracks. Then there are something like very rarely been found like those of the rain imprints, and also angular unconformity. Because any place you are seeing an angular unconformity, it is well understood that the one which is highly deformed, which is lying, and the one which is less deformed, which is overlying that highly deformed terrain, the less deformed one will be younger as compared to the lower highly deformed terrain. So like this, we can uh, know the which side is the younging up direction. Next, please. Now, identification of these structures is very important, because if suppose you are working in a very highly deformed terrain, you may encounter some overturned beds, or say overturning of the beds will happen. And there, how you are going to identify whether those are overturned? By using these type of structures. Now we know that there are certain structures like called as cross beddings, which is very common. And we also know that there are some top set, foresets, and bottom sets within that. So this is how we classify their morphology. And you can see that the foresets come and truncate with the top set at an angle, at a very high angle, whereas the bottom set, the foresets come and become parallel or become tangential to the bottom set. That is, it becomes very much parallel or will be having a very low angle with the bottom set when they are going to interfere with that. So the upside direction or the younging direction is in the top set side. That is where it is cutting at a high angle. This top set bed is actually a erosional plane, so that after that one erosion, another set of bed will be depositing. This is a very clear-cut evidence which we can use in field to identify the younging up direction. Next, please. Next. So these are some of the other type of cross beds. Like planar crossbed and trough crossbeds. You can notice that the troughs which are there, the trough's concave side is in the heaven side, that is in the top side. So if you're seeing a trough crossbeds whose concave side is downward, you can understand that the bed has been overturned. And so thus this concave side direction will be helping you in identifying which side it is the younger side. Next, please. Now, similarly, mud cracks, which is very much commonly seen in recent also, you can notice that these desiccations which produce very well pattern of mud cracks because of the shrinking, or say because of the evaporation of the water. And you can notice that there will be a concave part will be there in the mud cracks, and these cracks will narrow downward. So where these cracks are broader side, you understand that it is the upper side, or say younging direction. That is, over it, no other thing has yet been deposited when it was formed. If suppose it has been lithified, or say after their formation, the crack has developed, and after that, if some sediments are coming, it is obviously those are younger sediments. So this V shape in the cross-sectional part is very important. The upper part of the V will indicate the younging up direction. Next, please. Similarly, graded bedding is also one of the way. If suppose it's a normal grading, so coarse to fine word it will be happening. The coarser sediments will settle downward, which will be heavier, and finer will settle down afterwards. And this can indicate a younging up direction. But we should always be very careful or cautious, because reverse gradings are also a thing of which we should be very careful. But sometimes they will be not that common, but we should keep it in mind that this is not 100% way to define which side is younging up, because if we make an error in identifying whether it is a reverse or a normal grading, our interpretation can go wrong. Next, please. Similarly, sometimes it so happens that rock sediments of different grain sizes, like say mud and say sand, if they are depositing one after another, in such a scenario, because of these density contrast or say rheological contrast, if suppose, for example, here in the right side, what you're seeing, if mud has been deposited after that sand has been deposited, because of its heaviness or high specific gravity of the sand, it will settle down, and mud, as being it's a very weak one, there these sands will come up like a lobes or a broad curve type of a structure, which we call it as a ball and pillow type of structure. This is especially because of the density contrast. And you can notice that where these circular sand bodies are there, that is what we are calling it as a ball, in the sides of that, some flame type of structures are coming up. Flame means those angular parts, what we are seeing, they're called as flame structures. These flame structures, where they're sharper, that upper side will indicate that it's the younging upward direction, that is way up. That is this in the upper side of this photograph, for example, the upper side where the sands are there, they are younger than that of the mud. So like that, we can easily identify that. Similarly, the ball and pillow as such, when you are saying, they're convex downward and concave upward. That's the direction. Next, please. Then there are some soil structures are there. Soil means they will be forming at the bottom part of this sedimentary or the beds. These all soil structures, you will be seeing that they are erosional features along the interface of the sedimentary beds due to the powerful currents they will be forming. For example, flute or tool marks or scours or gutters there, and all of them, just previous one, previous, yeah, all of these will be having these three important points: that there must be a pre-existing sedimentary substrata should be there. Then erosion will be there, which will make some hole or a depression will be generating, and these hole or depressions will be getting filled up with the overlying deposit of the sediments. And once they have been filled up, we call it as a karst. You must have heard about flute karst. If it has been filled up, we are calling it as a flute karst. That is, it's a positive shape, what we call it as a positive shape. And if it's a negative, it's just simply a hole. So next, please. So generally, negative shapes will not be preserved. They will be filled up, like what you're seeing in the bottom left side. That's a flute karst actually. You see, it's a filled up one. It's the negative one. It's just the impression of the lower part on the upper sediments. So these, which are looking like these flutes, what you're seeing here on the left side, they're the karsts. A very convincing photograph, what you can see here, is that of the central part where sandstone and shale are there, just like that of the ball and pillow. You can notice that these shales have been deposited. After that, some current energies would have eroded this part of the shale, and then these sandstones would have deposited. Now, this flute has developed in the shale actually, which is a negative structure. That is a negative relief, you can say. That's why we are calling it as a negative. And the flute is just like a cast, which is just casting over this particular shape. So that's why this is forming like this. So you can notice this, that the concave side, which is there, or say rather no, the concave side is the bottom side of the concave is the older side, and the opening of this cast is in the direction of younging up. So the photograph what you're seeing on the left bottom part is actually representing that it's an inverted one that has been kept there, and it is uh, the block has been overturned here right now. Next, please. Similarly, tool marks are also there, which form hard objects like which is formed by, say, cobble, bone, anything, any hard object. If it hits the surface, some marks will be developing on the surface of the sediments. That's why they're called as tools. These tools can be something like cobble, pebble, or any larger grains, or say wood, bone, anything. They will be hitting the bottom surface of the sediments, and they will mark up something. These continuous tool marks are elongated grooves or chevrons, both oriented parallel to the. I mean, they will also indicate the flow direction also sometimes. Next, please. Tool marks are like discontinuous tool marks, and some are continuous type, like those of the groups. Continuous ones you will be seeing to be elongated ones, which will be forming larger length type, whereas some will be discontinuous type, like bounce, prod, or skip type marks. They are actually all forming because we know that when the grain sizes are bigger, they will be uh, saltating, or say bouncing over the sedimentary surface. That is what we are calling as saltation process. Whereas some will be going along the surface of the sediment itself. They will be rolling. So these processes we have already studied in earlier lectures, possibly, that rolling, saltation, and flotation. These are the three important features. Out of these saltation and rolling can develop these different type of tool mark structures. One, that you can define the orientation of the flow direction, means either this side or that side. Some can even give you the exact one, like the grooves marks can possibly define sometimes the exact direction of the flow, but not always. But however, you will be knowing that whether it is north or south or east or west, in whatever direction it is, both the sides you will be able to know it. So even here, the same way what we have studied about the flute marks, the same thing you can apply here to understand the way up direction also. Next, please. Okay, next, please. Right. Similarly, there are some other structures also, like those of the stromatolites. They also tell us the younging upward direction. They usually grow upward towards the sunlight part. They are the algal mats. So these will be growing upward, and they used to form a convex upward, that is a dome-like shape in the upper part. So if you're seeing a stromatolite, the cross-sectional part, if you're able to see, the broader part which is in the in which direction it is, you have to identify that part. That side will be the younging upward direction. They used to get broader in the upper side because they move towards the sunlight. So you can even apply stromatolites also as a structure which can define the younging upward direction. Next, please. All right. Then some of the features like those of the slump beds, these or say convolute beddings there, you'll be seeing some of the structures would have developed in a totally undeformed terrain, say, and or a package of sediment. In between, you will be getting a highly deformed rocks, like say folded, thrusted, or faulted. Number of deformation would have happened, and these folds you will be seeing, they won't be harmonic in nature. Harmonic means fold trains. Trains means the, say, syncline, synform, antiform, synform, antiforms will be repeating at a very regular interval. That's what we call it as a harmony. Whereas disharmonic folds means you won't be getting that type. Like here, what you're seeing, that a straight limb is coming and then it's becoming folded. Two folds you're able to see, and then it's again becoming the limb becoming very much parallel to the upper part. It's not deformed. So such type of a disharmonic folds you will be seeing, and number of faults will be generating there. And you will also be able to see some erosional planes also, where it will be cutting the fold part. You can notice in the upper part, they have been cut through. These are some erosional planes. If you are able to identify very clear, means clearly or very correctly, these erosional planes, they can also act as a upward direction. That is, above it, whatever the sediments have deposited should be younger than these lower sediments in which you are seeing the slump beds. Next, please. All right. Now coming, I just gave a very brief introduction to these structures. I might have missed number of other structures also, but these are very common ones which you will be seeing. Now, when we go in field, you will be seeing number of post-depositional structures, that is mostly which will be guided by tectonics or say local also. In all these things, you will be seeing that when sediments used to develop, some sort of a compression can also act upon. And in these compressive ones, there can be different type of means uh, principles can be applied, like those of the dilation, pure shear, folding, and imbrications. So due to dilation, you can notice that you can get development of the cleavages, and pure shear means no as such deformation you will be seeing, just compression will be happening, which is very uncommon type of thing in field actually, or in nature actually. You will be getting some combination of the pure shear and other things also, or depending upon the depth of the sediment in which it is present, it can generate a folds also. That is a ductile type of a deformation which is going to generate folding. You can also get some imbrications, like one of the layer will jump upon another, just like a horse type of thing, like in a thrusted terrain. That is, thrusting of the bed can happen. Next, please. Okay. Now, before we move forward for more details of the structures and other things, let's discuss something more about it, like in a uh, continent collision, because these are very common ones where you will be getting a lot of sedimentary basins also to have been trapped. Basically, when we say the foreland term, it is the footwall area of the footwall part of a terrain. Like say the one what I'm showing you in this photograph, if we think them to be Himalaya, suppose the left side is the India and the right side is your Asian part. So this is the thrust which is in the southern part. So we are in the hinterland part, you can say, and this Asian part, or say the China or these areas, they are the foreland part. So these are the footwall area, and the hinterland part is the part where you will be getting orogenic belts, where the deformed basins you will be able to see there. Next, please. Okay. Now this diagram, everyone we have seen, that is a type of a fold classification, where we used to discuss about whether the fold is the interlimb angle, how the angle between the two limbs, what is the angle is there. So we classify them as gentle, open, tight, and isoclinal. This we all know it. But what is the significance is that the more the deformation is going on, say the more it is getting compressed, in that way the more compressed one will lead to a more to a less interlimb angle. That is, the interlimb angle will start to get lower as you go on compressing it more. Next, please. Now the same concept, if you start to apply, you can notice it here. This in this diagram on the left side, the top part, this photograph is actually taken from one of the paper which discuss about the overturned generation of the overturned beds. You can notice the upper part. These are the asymmetrical folds. That is, you can see the axial plane is tilted, and as it goes on, sorry, it discuss about the recumbent folds actually. As it goes on, you can notice that the compression is going on, and also shearing is also going on. Because of this, you can notice that the upper limb is actually all been rotated along with the lower part of the limb. You can notice both the closures are getting the axial plane is getting near about horizontal, which is going to give rise to a recumbent fold. Now, in such a terrain where sedimentary rocks have undergone a very high, means say fold and thrust belt type of a terrain, if these type of structures have developed, and if you do not apply the principles of the structures, we are going to do is that we are going to number, or say going to map these same limb, that is the same stratigraphic unit, as two different units. You can see it here, that is the same unit which is repeating one over another. You can even say that it is near about been, because of the overturning and also by lateral thrusting, they have been over riding each other. Next, please. The same thing has been shown here with a different diagram. Earlier, it was an upright fold. As it goes on, you go on increasing the shear stress, that is parallel to the strike. If you go on shearing this whole thing, it will start to become inclined, then overturn, then recumbent to isoclinal, and even they can get refolded. Next, please. Okay. So these are the changes in the shapes and the orientation of the folded layers which is happening. And they're very important when we are going to map. We have to identify these structures very carefully. You can notice I had just taken up one example from Ramsay 1983 paper, which actually discuss about these recumbent folds, where you can notice that how much shear strain you have applied. That is alpha, yes, sorry, this shear strain value gamma, and you can notice that as the shear strain values are increasing, it's becoming more and more, the axial plane is becoming more and more horizontal, or even tilt, or even rotated itself. Next, please. So these are the characteristic of a fold and thrust belt. Why I'm talking about fold and thrust belt? Because many of the sedimentary basins, you apart from the Gondwana basins, what we are talking, you'll be seeing that they have undergone some deformation. Whether you see Aravali's, where whether you see some of the CIT along the CITZ, or say the Kadapa basin, or some of the other basins also, like in the Eastern Ghats also. Actually, some of the units are sedimentary, but obviously now you are not able to see any sedimentary packages there as such, because all the primary structures have been eroded out and they have all been metamorphosed. So you cannot say that it's a typical it's a sedimentary terrain, but actually it was, some part was sedimentary. So they have undergone some deformation, and when you see the Himalayas also, lot of these things are there. So that's why I'm focusing more on the compressional part. So in such type of terrain where more overturning has happened, and after overturning of the beds has happened, after that what will happen, that when the rocks are not able to accommodate that amount, that much of stress in terms of strain, they will start to move along a weak plane, what we can call it as a fault. And as because compression is going on, they act as a thrust planes, and overriding of these beds will be happening. This sort of a thrusting what is happening can even lead to the movement of the upper block, what we're calling it as a hanging wall block, to move further, maybe beyond say 20s of kilometers, or 30 kilometers or more, or even more than that, say hundreds of kilometers also. Such type of structures are called as nappe structures. I'll just request you to go back a bit, previous slide, where we were talking about the overturning of the beds. Sham, please. Previous one. Just one more previous. One more previous. Yeah, this one. The left side diagram. Previous. Yeah, this one. Yeah. In this one, the left side diagram, you see that the folds are becoming inclined, and then they're getting, obviously they had already been overturned because they have become inclined, and then after the overturning, you see they have become a recumbent fold, and after that, when they are not able to take up that strain, that amount of stress, the strain is accommodated by the movement along a plane. You can see the the last pic of this left side photograph, the bottom last. You can see that there is a line is there between the two hinge planes. They have been totally been disconnected now, and this plane you can call it as a thrust plane. If this sort of a movement, the upper part, what we are calling it as a hanging wall, if this one moves for kilometers, generally there is a controversy, or you can say the people are still trying to figure out what distance we will call it as a nappe actually. But some people consider it to have moved, say, 3 kilometers or 5 kilometers. We can call it as a nappe. Otherwise, they do not call it as a nappe. There are examples. If you go in Alps, you will be seeing that hundreds of kilometers the movement of the hanging wall has happened. So such type of nappes are very beautifully been mapped by Ramsey and has already been documented. So next, please come back to the our previous slide. It's not previous. Yeah, this one, thrust nappe. So you see, because of this nappe, is bounded by a basal fault actually. This basal fault, yes, where you are marking it, just above the allochthonous and autochthonous, you can notice there are two terms been written on the photograph, allochthonous and autochthonous. Auto means it's there itself, it's not been moved. So the yellow part with dots, what is there, they are the autochthonous part. They're in situ material, or you can say they are the basement for the allochthonous one. Allo term, whenever it is coming, you understand that it's not there. It has came from somewhere else. So this allochthonous part, which is, you can say it as a sedimentary part, suppose, and this contact between the allo and autochthonous part, which is marked by a dark line, it's actually a fault. We call it as a sole thrust or a floor thrust, along which this overlying roof thrust has moved. And this sole thrust, which separates the entire stack of this one, which is the bottom part, which is usually less deformed or undeformed. That is, your autochthonous part is usually undeformed or less deformed. This is called as the detachment or decollement. This particular layer, all right, this layer which is above the autochthonous. If such movement will happen and after that erosion happens, you will be noticing some of the parts where the sedimentary rocks will be sitting over a bottom part, which is called as clippe, and some places you'll be seeing windows. We have some confusions also sometimes in terms of inlier and outlier, but notice that in terms of inlier outlier, there is no tectonic movement. Both the upper part and the lower part are all autochthonous. There is no allochthonous part there. When allochthonous material is there and then erosion will be happening, you'll be getting some parts which is, say, younger part overlying the older material. We call it as clippe. Both can happen, means older can come up over younger, or younger can come over the older in a thrust terrain. There is nothing like that older will always come over the younger part. It's not like that. Even younger materials can get thrusted over the older also sometimes. So once they have been eroded, we call it as a clippe and nappe. If you clippe and window. If you're getting a clippe and a window, it's sure shot that it's a thrust nappe. It's a nappe terrain you are seeing. Next, please. All right. Now, before we move forward or discuss more about the mapping aspects in terms of that, I just want to pick up some of the important aspects also. Like here, you see the first photograph. It starts with S1 actually. You can say it's S0 also. There is no problem. S0 means, let's consider it to be a bedding plane. Okay, well, the bedding plane has been deformed and a fold has been formed. If the more deformation is going on, you will be seeing that a generation of cleavage will be developing up. Like here, what you're seeing is written as S2 in figure C. S1 you understand here as to be the bedding plane. It's just written, I should have changed that number. Okay, the cleavage will start to develop. If deformation goes on increasing, ultimately you will be seeing that, say in the figure F, you will be seeing that if this situation also you go on increasing the deformation, the interlimb angle will start to decrease further, and a case will come up when the folds will become isoclinal, and there will be a problem in field also, that you won't be able to differentiate between the S1 and S2, or say S0 and S1. There, the S1 and S2 will become parallel. That is, the earlier and latter foliations will become parallel. That is called as transposed. There will be a transposition will happen, and you won't be able to differentiate between them. So that is why one of the suggestion which I always give to everyone is that when you are going to a field, and if you are very much sure that some deformation happened, always try to see with lens in the field, or break the sample and see it very carefully whether you are able to see any fold closures there or not. Like in the figure you are seeing some fold closures or the hinge zones, you are able to notice it there. Such type of hinge zones, if they're isolated type, you are seeing in between two foliations, if you are seeing, we call it as intrafolial folds, because it is between two foliations. We call it as intrafolial. Intra means between, and folia means foliation. Between two foliations, these folds are there, so we call it as intrafolial folds. So identification of such folds, if you are able to identify them, it will be a very great thing that you will be able to differentiate between the actual and the latter foliations easily. Next, please. Okay. Now, when we go to field, and if we notice that there are folds are there, cleavages have been developed, and you know that folds can be of any sizes. It can be microscopic to even macroscopic. Macroscopic means the whole of the hill you will be seeing, it will be just one single limb, and the other limb will be the other hill. So it can be that much large also, and even smaller folds can even develop. If such a situation is happening, and like what an example what you have seen, that of an elephant, we usually see that a geologist who is studying a leg, they will be talking about something else. One who is seeing the tail, they will be talking something else, or their interpretation will be different. But we, being a geologist, a good or smart geologist, we have to have an idea that where we are actually standing, and in which direction where when we will go, which fold closer we are going to encounter, whether it will be antiformer closer or a synformer closer. Now notice it here. I have marked the red line. You can notice I have marked two separate lines. You see on the left bottom part where red is the bedding, blue is the cleavage. All right. You see the angle between the bedding and the cleavage. Bedding is the red line, and the blue line is your cleavage line. Okay. The acute angle which is there between the bedding and the cleavage, that acute angle will define where the fold closure will be happening. So if suppose you are standing in an area which is just a small part in this, where you can see the red marker is been marked, in that part you are only there. The angle between that, the acute angle where it is there, the beds will try to move away from the acute angle when it will start to go in the closer part. So you can notice it here, that the fold closure of the antiform is happening away from this acute angle of between the bedding and the cleavage. Whereas in the bottom part, you see again the acute angle is there. The beds are moving away from this acute angle. All right. So it is just this thing we have to remember, that the beds will move away from the acute angle between the bedding and the cleavage, and the closure will happen there. So in field, if you are there, and if you are able to identify between the angle between that, you have to fix up where the this acute angle is there. Like that, you can define if I'm going to the, say, in which direction we are going, you'll be getting the which type of fold closer, whether it is synformal or antiformal. This identification will help you, as you know, that in a normal folding, not an overturned folded bed, I'm saying, in a normal folded bed, in the core part of the synform, you will be getting younger beds. In the core part of the antiforms, you will be getting the older beds. This is the general rule, right? So if we, while doing the mapping, if we apply this fundamental, you will be having a pre-idea that in which direction I am going, I'll be encountering a younger or a older rocks. That will be very much helpful actually. Similarly, you notice that in this case, the bedding is gentler than the cleavage. You can see that the blue line on the left side diagram I'm talking, the blue line is a steeper one as compared to the bedding one. So when the limbs are normal, that is, they are not overturned, in such a situation, bedding planes will be gentler than the cleavage. Whereas in an overturned situation, on the right side photograph, when you're seeing, you can notice the, yes, where the right side limb, what you're seeing, this limb is actually overturned. In this limb, you can notice that the bedding is steeper than the cleavage. Cleavage has become gentler than that of the bedding. So if such type of situation you're seeing, you're not at all knowing anything, you haven't seen any younging upward direction, you haven't seen any sedimentary primary structure, suppose you say, you have gone to the outcrop and you have seen the difference between the bedding and the cleavage, and you have noticed that the cleavage is gentler than the bedding, you can directly say that it's an overturned bed. Then you try to justify your observation by putting more number of observations. Like you have to search for those primary structures which will help you determine that which side is the younging up direction. So in geology as such, or say wherever you go, whether you write paper or you go for a seminar or you are defending your FSP report, anyone can ask what is by which you have defined it. The more number of observations you are having, the more confidence you will be having. Okay. All right. So the overall crux of this slide is that bedding plane closes away from the acute angle between bedding and cleavage. All right. When you are doing the mapping in a deformed sedimentary terrain. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Am I audible? Just previous one. सुनाई दे रहा है क्या? हेलो, एक और होगा, एंटी फॉर्म होगा, एक इससे प्रीवियस वाला, या दिस वन. So you see this particular diagram. These all we know, but somehow I have to put it. Any of the antiforms, when we see, like here, what you're saying, it's a very upright fold. Yes, the and it's a non-plunging fold. You notice it's a non-plunging upright fold. You can see that the beds on the surface of the earth, they're actually repeating. The repetition of the beds are happening because there are folded units. This particular thing, you can even get it in a synform also. Next, please. And same way in the core part, you'll be seeing the younger beds in the folded terrain. This this is another important aspect which we should always keep it in mind when we are doing field work in a sedimentary terrain, that if beds are repeating, and we have to be very carefully identify the beds or the units when we are doing. Generally, the most common sedimentary rocks are your sandstone, limestone, and say your shale, right? Apart from that, some others are there, like mixed sediments are there. Then some not that common type of, say, you can even get coals also. Then you can get some evaporites, not that much common. So if you're getting these type of sediments, the most common three sediments, if you take up, you can have in a stratigraphic sequence number of sandstone units which will be repeating. When we are doing this study, we have to be stones.
Because are you able to hear me? I think there is some network issue, so please with us. We will be back.
Am I audible now?
Yes, Vikas, we are audible.
Okay. तो एक बार प्रीवियस स्लाइड लगा देना फिर से. Okay. So I was talking here that if parallel beds on a map, if you see, like in SynForm or say Antiforms, you're seeing, or even in a remote sensing data, if you simply say Google Earth, also if you're seeing repetition of parallel beds are there, you can understand that some sort of a non-plunging folds are there. Next, please. Same way, if you notice it here, that in the upper part you can see it's a plunging fold is there. The fold axis having an angle, and their impression on the surface of the earth or on the map, you can see there is a fold closer, you can see it there. So any folds on the map, if or the beds or any sedimentary beds, if you see to be forming a fold closer on the map or on the surface of the earth, let's say on a satellite image or on the geological map, if you're seeing such type of fold closer, you should understand that you're seeing a plunging fold. They cannot be non-plunging, they will be plunging fold. Because of the plunge, that closer is now visible in that plane actually. So such type of things we should keep it in mind. And when we are doing any sedimentary mapping, the first thing is that we should go for a remote sensing study. That is what we say the pre-field study, all those photogeology or say Google Earth image, those that you can do it always. And this process should not be restricted only to pre-field actually. Even in field time also, you should be going through these images always, because they are very much helpful. I will be showing you some of those aspects what I have done myself while doing some of the mapping in some sedimentary terrains, and I'll show you how they become very helpful actually. Next, please. Now notice it here. This is a image from the Google Earth. This is from some area from Venezuela actually, something in South America part. And you can notice these are the fold closures you are able to see. That itself indicates that these are some plunging folds. All right. You can see the axial plane is actually in east-west direction of this photograph actually. Okay. Next, please. Next, please. The same thing already has been discussed. Next. All right. Now, this was another thing what I was trying to discuss with you, that when I told you in terms of thrust, that it's not always that the younger will always come up over the older beds. Same thing you can even see in normal faults also. Now here you notice that these are some steep beds are there, right? There are some tilted one which has undergone a normal faulting, and because of this normal faulting, uh, you can notice that if suppose this upper part has been eroded, you'll be seeing the repetition of the beds will be happening, and these green part, green beds what you're seeing, these are the oldest one, followed by the yellow, then blue, then yellow, and this orange one. Okay, orange one is the youngest one. Now you can notice it here. Not audible. Am I still not audible? Hello.
Yes,
You're
you are
audible,
audible,
Vikas.
Vikas.
Hello.
Audible.
Audible, sir.
You are audible.
Okay. All right. So here you can notice that the older beds are overlying the younger bed. Say the green part is over the orange one, the extreme in the central part actually. So that can also happen in case of a normal fault also. So we should be very careful in defining these structures, and we should not have a preconceived idea that always it will happen that in a thrust older will come over the older will come over the younger, or say the younger will go down along the older one in normal faults. We should not have any preconceived idea. Our mind should always be open. Next, please. All right, I will not be discussing too much over here about these structures. These are the imbricate structures what you get in thrust belts actually. These are called as the imbricate fans. I had just put up here because I'll be discussing something in one of the examples or a field case study actually. You can notice that the left side photograph where foreland hinterlands are written, as we had already discussed about this hinterland and forelands, you can notice that there is a floor thrust or a sole thrust is there. The bottom part, bottom exactly the horizontal line which is going on, that's the floor thrust. And from there, number of thrusts will be coming up. These are called imbricate thrusts. So they can even tend to develop duplex also. On the right side of the photograph, you can see duplexes are formed, or even imbricate natures also. So these are called as imbricate zone, or they're very common in thrust zones actually. So if you're mapping such type of a sedimentary terrain, it will be very difficult to understand. I mean, it really becomes a complex thing. Next, please. Right. So I will try to give you a view about this, that how we can proceed to do some mapping. This was one of my first mapping area what I had done. You can see it's the part of the Kadapa Basin. It's in Andhra Pradesh, and you can see the The Kadapa basin is a crescent type part. The right side green ones you do not consider. Those are the Nellore cyst belts. The orangish color, the right side, which is the Nannamalai fold belt. It's a highly deformed fold and thrust belt. The blue part on the left and the deeper orange colored ones are the older sediments. The deeper orange ones are the older one. The blue ones are called as the Kurnool subbasin. They are the youngest one. And the Nannamalai fold belt, which is on the extreme right side, that is the light orangish one. They are the in between the blue and the dark orange ones. Okay, stratigraphically I'm talking. The Nannamalais are having a 1500 MA age, roughly I'm talking. The where it is written as Papaghani, that is the dark yellow part. In the curved part, what is there? That's about 2 giga annum. That's age, and the Nannamalais are 15, and the Kurnools are considered to be the Neoproterozoic. No exact date has been known for that, but they are understood to be Neoproterozoic like that. Some controversies are there, but leave it. They are the youngest one at least. Now, I had done this mapping in this area. You can notice that we are on the north part. You can see some fold closures are there. I'm talking about the right side photograph. You can see that some of these beds are repeating actually with the fold closures on the top part. And as you go to the right hand part, I had just shown those parts which I have mapped. So that's why it has become narrow area there. So where it's written as Kalva Kuntla Reserve Forest, in that part you can see the beds are actually repeating. Now, as such, you notice here that what are these beds are. These we have named it as lower Formomilla quartzite. Okay. Before that, this large part is called as the Tecropeta quartz phyllite actually, where you can see it's written as Tecropeta anticline actually. This part is all quartz phyllite. Then quartzite is there, that is brown colored. Then upper one is again a quartzite, what is yellowish part. Then shale is there. Then green colored phyllite is there. Then again a quartzite is coming. You see, we are encountering quartzites three times actually. Okay, so three type of quartzites we have noticed, and some of them are actually repeating one or more than once. And we have been able to determine the difference based upon their uh, nature of the quartzite, that is whether they are fine grain, coarse grain, and also what type of grains they are present within them. Some of the minor ones we had identified that they were having some cherts also. Some were not having any cherts within them. So these were some of the criteria by which we have been able to determine that differences. Next, please. Now notice that, yeah, this has been blown up here now, and you can notice that there are a number of thrusts are also there. You can see dentations, the dark colored triangles in the map area. Those are all thrust planes. Those thrust planes have been identified by some of the pylonites or mylonite present within these areas. Based upon that, we have identified these thrust zones. And notice that the area on the left side where A is written, the upper part of the diagram you see, where T1 is written, that is the thrust 1 is there. You see there is a brown colored bed is there. That is actually a quartzite that's dipping towards the eastern side. Whereas the T2 in the cross section, you notice there is a T2 written. That part is also a quartzite. That is also dipping on the eastern side. Both the beds are dipping to the eastern side. Both are quartzites, you notice. Again, you notice when you are going further, again, these are all dipping towards the eastern side. All the beds are dipping towards the eastern side. But still, you see, we are able to determine that these are actually folded. How we have been able to determine? You further see that in the T1, in the left side, T1, where it is written as T1, that is the thrust one, this quartzite, on the upper part, you can notice some double-sided heads arrows are there. That indicates the younging direction actually. Using the cross beds, we have been able to define that the younging side of the bed is on the western side, okay, on the left side of this cross section. So that means that, and as we know that there is a general rule also along the dip direction, when we go, we will be getting the younger beds actually. That's for a normal sequence. But here what we are able to see that if we go from T1 to along the dip direction, we should be getting younger beds. But the younging up direction is showing that the western side is the younger beds which are present, which is underlying this quartzites. So based upon that, we have identified that this is the overturned limb actually, and the normal limb is around the T2. We connected these both of them, and where it is written as Tecura peta, you can notice it there, the large area between the T1 and T2. This is all actually quartz phyllite actually. It's more like phyllite having some quartzitic layers in between them. Or you can say it was actually a shale actually, which has been metamorphosed slightly. So if you connect them, you can understand that this quartz phyllite is actually an older bed than that of the quartzite. So like this, we had been able to define, and we had put up the stratigraphy in that way that we had named it as Tecura peta quartz phyllite overlain by the lower Parmomilla quartzite, like that. Okay, so like this, we have been able to define the stratigraphy. Now at around T2, you can notice that again it is a normal limb, so the upper part you are able to define it. Now see in the extreme right side of the cross section, again we have been able to see that the younging up direction is on the left side. The pinkish colored quartzite, what we are seeing, is on the left side, younging up direction is there. It is because of, possibly because of the thrust, this overturning has happened there. Okay, so if we are not able to understand what exactly the structural dispositions has happened, you notice that these are all folds. These folds are inclined to overturn. The way I had discussed in the previous slides about the overturning of the beds, how the beds have overturned, they become reclined and then thrusted. Here also again, overturning has happened and thrusting has happened. These are very common things. If overturned beds are happening, if you go on giving more strain, obviously some thrusts or faults will start to develop. So the same thing has happened here also. And we had correlated it like that. Next, please. These are some of the photographs. You can notice in the right side photograph, very tight isoclinal folds are present. You can even notice that the left side of the limb is actually overturned. You notice that around the bottom side, exactly bottom part where the fold closure is present, you can easily identify the overturning of the bed where, yes, that it's overturned. So these are some other features which has been very helpful in identifying our observations apart from some of the basic ones. These structures, what you are saying, these we saw afterwards before we identified that the beds were overturned. Once we have a better idea, at a single outcrop, we have been having an idea, we can then think about it further. Because if I already tell you that you see you are standing on an overturned bed, and overall terrain, you are knowing that it's a deformed terrain, you will expect more overturned beds in throughout the area. So like this, your mind will go on while you do the further mapping. Next, please. Similarly, we have got some of the these type of shear bands also in these areas, which have actually identified with the help of the movement direction. We had identified them to be thrust planes, and these thrust planes were also having a left lateral shearing. That's a different story actually, because we have interpreted it to be a compressional type of a terrain actually, where a general type shear has have been applied. So all those other aspects can also be dealt with. If you do very good structure, you'll be able to identify that. So these type of structures were also helpful in identifying the structures in those areas. Next, please. All right. Now, I just taken up one of the my field photographs just to show you another important aspect here. This blue part of the Kadapa basin, they are actually two sub-basins. One is called as the Palnad, one is called as the Kurnool. And the Kurnool sub-basin, what I said, these are the Neoproterozoic youngest sediments of the Kadapa basin. Kadapa basin is actually not a single basin actually. It consists of number of sub-basins like the Papagani sub-basin, Kurnool sub-basin, Sri Salem sub-basin, then Nanamalai sub-basin, then Palnad sub-basin. These are small sub-basins which are divided in time also. They have deposited in different time scales. So this Kurnool sub-basin, you notice I have given the stratigraphy, Banaganapalli, Narji, Oak Shale. You notice the Oak Shale thickness is 15 meter, whereas the other ones you notice, the Banaganapalli 50 meter, 200 meter, 35 meter, 50 meter, 100 meter Nandyal Shale. All are near about 50 to 100 meter thicknesses are there. And Oak Shale is a very thin bed actually, 15 meter. Now notice that this thickness is actually a stratigraphic thickness. We should not get confused at the outcrop thickness. At outcrop, sometimes oak shells you'll be seeing just 1 meter or even less than 1 meter. That much of thickness is also there. That's also recorded. And at some places you'll be seeing it to be, say, 100 meter also it can go. But this is all stratigraphic thickness actually. So what can happen that a 15 meter thickness, roughly we are saying, because we have mind, when we see the stratigraphic thickness, we put it in our mind that, okay, roughly it will be somewhere like that much of thickness. But at some of the places, as in this photograph you can see, these are very thick ones. Even the whole of the hill, we have seen that it's all oak shale actually. This is along a fault which is called as a Gani Kalwa fault, very famous fault. People must have gone there also because earlier when the OCG goes, the PGRS at Hyderabad module, they used to take the trainees there also. So along this fault, you can notice that they are a very thick one. I've shown you just a single section of that. In fact, the whole of the hill also, the near about 100 meter thick hills are also there, which are there. We notice that there are some thrusts are there. You can notice the sketch what I have drawn out of that photograph. These number of thrusts are there, and this thrust trackings has actually increased the thickness of the of this thin oak shells here to be a very thicker one in these areas. So this thickness increase, what is happening, can also be very helpful when you are mapping an area. Because if suppose in a map you have given a high thickness beds in a particular area, someone can definitely ask you that why this has happened. So here also a role of structure definitely plays a very important role. Next, please. Acha, one important point to that previous one, because I will discuss it. That oak shale, that thrusting has happened because of the compression in the north-south compression. That fault is actually east-west fault, and this compression is actually north-south. We will discuss more about it afterwards. Now you see one another area when you go to the northern part of the Nanamalai fault bed. I'm coming back to the Nanamalai fault bed. It's a very classical terrain actually when you deal with the sedimentary and the structures together. You notice that in this geological map, what we have prepared here, you can see that there is a light orange colored quartzite is in the upper flank of that, just at the contact of the blue colored one, right? This light orangish colored quartzites are there. And then there is a dark colored or dark orange V-shaped outcrops are there. You can see there V-shaped outcrop, dark colored. On the right and left flanks, yellow colored materials are also there. Those are all quartzites actually. These are also quartzites. The light orange color or orange or say pinkish colored ones are also quartzites. Both are quartzites, but stratigraphically they are different. If we do not apply this structural aspect, we can mix up both of them and say, okay, these are all quartzites, that's it. But basically, when you see the structural patterns here, what I'm going to show you, they are very much helpful in defining the difference. Next, please. Okay. Now, before we did it, we gone through some of the Google images. You can notice it here in this Google image. The left side, You can see it's a very dense forest. These are highly dense forests. The dark green color itself is saying. You can notice that there are some fold closures you can easily identify there. Number of fold closures are there, one after another, which are northwest southeast trending, right? All these are fold closures you are able to see. We had already said that a fold closure on the surface of the earth or on the map define that they are plunging folds. So before going to field itself, I have an idea that I am going to see some plunging folds, which will be plunging in the northeast or southwest direction, like that. So this sort of a idea, if you are having already, and you notice that this D-shaped pattern of this in the central part of this Google image, you can notice a V-shaped part is there, which I said that it's a different quasit, but this is also quasit. Very close spaced folds are there. They are also all northwest southeast trending folds. These are similar to that of the southwestern part of the photograph. What you are seeing, these are all folds of the Nanamalai fold belt. Next, please. Right, more blown up photograph now of this area. Now you can easily identify these folds. These fold closures are very well developed in the right side. If you see on the right side, you can see the fold closures are very well developed, and the plunges are also very well seen that they're plunging towards northeast direction. They're plunging, right? If I say, you can see actually the beds are also visible. Actually, you can easily say that one is dipping towards northwest and another is dipping towards southeast, where the southeastward it is dipping, and the fold is plunging towards northeastern side, right? Again, if we come to the south part, again a fold closer you are able to see. All right. If you come further southward, yeah, in the central part, after that fold closer, another fold closer is there. So these two fold closures, if you bring the cursor to the right side along this axis itself, you can notice that these two fold closures are there. The first fold closure, what we are discussing, you can interpret it to be an antiform actually, at least from your Google image. We will see what we have encountered in the field actually. It's like an antiform. The second fold, what we are seeing is just to the south of the first fold closure, that is also an antiform. You notice that these two antiforms are another means the syn form is actually missing actually here. You're able to see two antiforms actually. In field also, when we went there, we had been able to identify these two antiforms very clearly. There was no wrong interpretation from the Google image. The in between line, what you're seeing, it's a valley area there. That area is actually should have been a syn form. But when folds are happening in a harmonic nature, the width of that wave of the antiform and synform, when you say, it should be equal. But here you are not able to see it. You are seeing two antiforms close by together. They are juxtaposed with each other. So such type are actually saying that somewhere my synform has gone away. It's not there. So that's why that particular valley we can interpret to be a fault actually. Okay. If you move the cursor to the further northward, yeah, this one. Yeah, this particular line, there should be a synform should be there. That synform is actually missing because where the cursor is right now been put up, you can see that the beds are dipping towards east, whereas just the southward limb is actually dipping towards northwest. These two are not very much, they are forming a very close fold actually, very close synform. But actually that synform should have overall width of similar to that of the antiform. So like that we have interpreted that. And when we went to the field, next please. Yeah, so this is the same thing you can see. We have interpreted that fault or thrust line, you can notice by the red line. Next, please. I'll try to show you the photographs rather than the photograph. Yeah. Now you see in the top part there, just previous one, just one previous you go. Just go back a bit. Yeah. In this one, you see where it is some small outcrops you are able to see in the northern part of this orangish shade, where this yellow colored small outcrops are there, just west of Kakirala, where it's written as Kakirala village is there. Yeah, that's this one. This yellow patch, over it some small quasites are there. These yellow ones are actually oak shales, okay? And over it some quasites are there. Earlier mappers has identified to be a Panyam quasite, which is actually part of the Karnool. The blue ones are the Narji limestone, which is also part of the Karnool sub-basin. Karnools, I again repeat, they are the youngest one, younger than that of the Nannamalai. So the sequence is Narji, Oak, and then the Panyam. So the same type of sequence we are able to see. But when we map this area, next please, these Narji limestones are actually near about undeformed. Very on a microscopic scale, you can see development of cleavages are there because overall it's a thrust terrain. This Narji limestone is actually a footwall type of area. And you can notice where the hammer is kept. Next, please. Yeah, close-up view. You can notice that there is a hammer been kept. That's actually a quasite. And where the pen is been kept, you can notice a fold is actually there where the pen is kept. White and red colored pen is kept there. There a fold is there on the right side. You can notice a fold is there. That's actually a shale actually. If you go further downward of this hill, actually when we started to climb, we saw that it's all undeformed horizontal beds are there. And when we just went up to the contact of this quasite with that of the shale, we have seen that the shales have also been folded. These quasites are all folded actually, very highly tight folded. Next one, please. Yeah, you can see it here. Highly, next one, please. Tight overturned folds. These are all tight overturned folds and having thrust or thrust sense also. You can see the drag of the beds are also easily visible, and the folds are all overturned. These are the quasites which are actually overlying the undeformed oak shale and the Narji limestone. Whatever the deformations the oak shale and the Narji limestones are showing you, they're all minor cleavage developments. Only at the contact with the quasite, you are able to see some foldings are there. But these quasites are highly deformed. Rheologically, that is the physical property of the quasite and shale, if you compare, if you deform a quasite, it's bound to be to show that the shales are also deformed. Shales are relatively weaker than that of the quasites. So this is how we identified that these quasites are actually your Nannamalai fold belt quasite, not of the Karnool. They are Nannamalai group of quasites. And as you can see in the map, just go previous, 2 times previous, just show me the map actually, the geological map. Yeah, now you see that this blue colored one, that is the Narji limestone, is actually all surrounding this, and the oak shale is also surrounding this small outcrops of the quasites. So this is a typical case where these quasites are highly deformed. They're showing similar type of deformations what you're seeing in the actual Nannamalai fold belt, where I have shown you the antiforms and the thrust, and these oak shells are nearly undeformed. So we identified these ones to be as clippe. Okay, this is a clippe, small clippe. Even if it's a very small one, and you can see that the oak shells have been eroded, that's why you're able to see in the ground part only these blue Narji limestones are all through is surrounded. So these are the clippes. They further indicate that we are in a thrust terrain. Okay, next please. So these are some of the mapping techniques actually. Even though both were quasites, next please. Even though both were quasites, overall our understanding and correctness of the map has been done. Next, please. Next. I don't know why it is repeating. Okay, here you see the one of the limb of that fold, what I was showing in the Google image. This is one of the limb. The left side photograph, what you're seeing, a very steep limb. And on that limb, you can notice lot of slicken sides are present. The right side photograph, what has been shown, is actually the slicken side photograph. It's a highly slicken sides are present. Next, please. And after that, it's a valley actually. These are showing you the plunge of the fold. Next, please. Yeah. Now when we come to the other part of the limb, where I was talking about the two antiforms where are there, where is my syn form? There on one of the limb, we had noticed that these cross beds are showing that they are means oppositely directed. That is, on the bottom side, younger beds are present. If you see this particular part photograph, this photograph is not that much great, but if you can say that in the northwestern side, younging direction is there. The cross beds are actually becoming tangentially parallel to the bedding plane in the southeastern side. Okay, so that's the older part, and the younger side is the northwestern side. So if you see the bed dip where the hammer is kept, you see it's dipping towards the southeastern side. I'm saying that younger direction is in the northwestern side. Like this, I had identified that these beds are all overturned beds. This was a very important one, and that actually helped us to further interpret those thrust zones also. Next, please. Okay, some other structures we should be very careful, especially in terms of shales actually. Shale, as you know, they are very fine grained, and if it's a very homogeneous, it's very difficult to identify even if they have been doubly deformed. If two generations of folds have even developed, it becomes very difficult to identify in field also that how the deformations are present. But this is what I was trying to say you, that you try to identify those intrafolial fold with the help of lenses, or if you are very lucky, you can even get such type of features also. These are some of the carbonate beds which are intercalated with the shale actually. These intercalated carbonate beds, the pinkish colored one, what you are seeing, these you can see they are tight or say isoclinal overturned beds there. And these shales are actually showing you, shale or phyllite you can say, these phyllites are actually showing the cleavage planes actually. However, these type of features we were not able to see everywhere because these intercalations were at some places only, not at all the places. So they actually helped us to understand, okay, these type of structures are also present and how the phyllites have been deformed. And actually the phyllites, what we are seeing, they're actually the S1 foliation, they're not the S0 planes. So whether it is S1 or S0, that is also very important to define, because S0 and S1 interpretation, if it goes wrong, our map contacts or our interpretation, what is going in our mind while we are doing the field work, can also go wrong, and ultimately we will land up at one place where you won't be able to interpret the whole structure altogether, or you won't be having a proper interpretation of your map what has been prepared. Next, please. Next. Okay, like this, once you have identified, it is always better to prepare cross sections. Prepare n number of cross sections in field itself, even in the field or in your camp or after coming back, because once you do this exercise of preparing cross section, which I know that many people who are working in Himalayas, they would be doing this regularly, because in Himalayas inaccessibility is very important aspect. You cannot go at every outcrop, and their cross sections are very helpful actually. So similar type of things you should prepare always. That will actually help you in defining or identifying some of the gap areas where it is required to go in a proper way. That is where you have to go and search for what is been present. Next, please. Here also you can see that I had prepared some double-sided headed arrows which indicate the younging direction, which side is the younger direction, which side is the older. That actually helps us in defining the overall thing. Now you see this is the clipe actually. So this is how we have interpreted this clipe, and you can see number, and we have identified this sole thrust is there. This you can say some interpretation is there, some observations are also there. And these steeper red lines, what is there, they are all imbricate thrusts actually. So they're coming from a sole thrust to a imbricate natured thrust. Next, please. Next. And then again, you see, once we had got a clipe, our mind was then going through that, okay, we had got a clipe, we should be getting a window also. And again, this all through searching through Google image actually helped me to identify this particular area based upon the contrast of the rock type. Because limestones, here the Narji limestones are gray in color. And in the window part where it is written window, in the Google image, we had seen some different color contrast there. So that actually called us that let's go and see that area. And that actually helped us in defining this clipe and window very nearby. So that you can see it there. Next, please. Next. Next. This, just go on. Just skip these stereo nets. Just skip this one. Okay, these shear bands are also very important to identify because they overall indicate the thrust planes or the movement planes. Next, please. And once we have an eye overall, next, similarly you see the transposition of S0 and S1 has happened here. So that actually is helping me in identification of the S0 actually. So once I understand that the S0 is actually parallel to S1, while mapping, I will be having a better idea that where I should be putting the contact and how rather the contact will be going through, where I will be getting the other contact of the lithology, like that, the things we can understand. Next, please. Next. Yeah, like this you can see. Now once you have an idea, even by seeing the hillocks, you can identify these thrust sheets which are lying one over another. Very beautiful one. You can easily notice it there where the cursors have been kept. At least you can see one, two, at least two planes you can appreciate very clearly. These two plane thrust sheets are very easily seen. And when you go there, you'll be seeing SC fabrics are present there. Next, please. Next. Just some of the more structures you can notice also to further understand whether that is a thrust plane or not, or a brecciated or a faulted area there is or not. Because sometimes similar type of lithologies will be there and you have to differentiate between them by the tectonic contact. Like here you can notice a lot of silicification has happened. Next. And this is a very unique feature what we have seen there. This is a quartzite, and you can, if you are able to see, there are a number of stylolites are present. Stylolites are some zigzag type of patterns which usually form when compression is been given. There will be a pressure solution will be developing, so material will go out. These type of features are very common in carbonate rocks, but this one is in quartzite. You can get it in quartzites also. And when we clubbed up these stylolites together, next please, you will be noticing that such type of a thrusted one, that is horses are actually being formed here. So these horses are over one another. Even though these quartzites are very uniform, compact, no other intercalations are present, because when sandstones are pure sandstones, if you metamorphose it to quartzites, it becomes very difficult to identify or differentiate between different layers also. Even finding a bedding plane becomes very difficult. So in such a situation, if some deformation happens, there also you first of the thing is that at outcrop level you won't be able to see folds clearly. If there is an intercalation, then it becomes very easy to identify the folds, or rather folds will develop more easily. So in such a situation, you can apply such structures also. So actually these stylolites were formed parallel to one particular plane, possibly the bedding plane, which has been thrusted later on. Next, please. These are some silicon sites. Skip this one. Next. Yeah, similarly, in one of the part, you can notice the upper part of the rocks and the lower part of the rocks. They are, roughly you can say similar, but they are different actually. The lower part is more like a shaly part. The upper part is more like a shale plus quartzite type of a lithology. If you do not see the structure clearly, you may interpret it to be a different lithology than the lower and the upper. But basically, what is that? It's all a phylitic package. The upper part is more of quartz phyllite. The lower part is more phylitic, which has somehow been weathered more. Now notice that fold, the red dotted line and the axial plane here. You notice in the bottom part, it's an inclined fold. Whereas the upper part, you notice it's all recumbent folds. Okay, the axial plane, you see, it has become horizontal actually. And the contact between these two, we interpreted it as a thrust plane. And these are actually a sole thrust type of a plane we have identified. Next, please. Okay. Now there is another one which we have identified just based upon some remote sensing. Remote sensing means we haven't used any photographs or aerial photographs or photo images. Just from a distance, by noticing the hill, what type of hill it is. Next, please. I'll just show you one interesting feature. Yeah, this part, you see there is a beak type of a thing, a yellow part you're seeing there, small outcrop is there. The blue is your Narji limestone of Kurnool Basin, and the yellow is your oak shale. This part, next please. If you go in the field, you will see the hills are like this. If from a distance also, if you notice it very carefully, you will be noticing the density contrast of the vegetation. You see in the left side, the density is very less. In the valley and that hillock, in that middle hill, density is very high. Just to the right of the central hill, again you see in the bottom part, small area, there is a low density vegetation is there. In the left side, further left. Yeah, this one. This part, vegetation is very less. This density in the vegetation contrast helped us in going there and see it very carefully. Why this density contrast has happened? Next, please. So actually, what we have identified is that these are all limestones where the density of vegetation density were very less, and where some density was high, these were the Nannamalai fold belts. And we have identified that the Narji limestones are actually near about horizontal to subhorizontal, with development of some mylonites, which are parallel to the bedding plane. However, no foldings were identified. Similarly, when we went up to this, where it is NFB is written, Nannamalai fold belt, it is highly deformed, folded and highly thrusted type of quartzites are there. Whereas the oak shale, again here, you notice that there is a movement of the blocks we have identified, normal faults we have identified. This type of feature had made to understand that some sort of a normal fault, which you can say as host and graben type of a structure, what you're seeing here, have developed prior to the thrusting of the Nannamalai fold belt. Okay, these type of structures are very clearly seen, mostly in the Nala zones, you will be able to see them. So if you are able to differentiate or identify these type of structures also, you will be having a better control of the tectonics also, that okay, there was some sort of extension happened before the compression or say thrusting of the non-anomaly has happened. Next, please. Next. Just skip these stereo nets. Just skip it. Next. Next. Yeah. So these were the structures we have able to see in the limestones, which are parallel to the bedding. You can notice these SC fabrics. You can even see winged clasps over there, which are showing you the top to the right, top to the left side movement. I won't say this is a left lateral movement. Notice this is actually a thrust. These beds are horizontally, these are horizontal beds over which over its cross section I am able to see like this. On the bedding plane, the bottom photograph you see, these are some myelonites which you are able to see parallel to the bedding. These myelonites are actually the result of these SC fabric or say the shearing actually, which is actually due to a thrusting overall. Next, please. Next. So like this, ultimately you can, by using that sole thrust and all these type of structures, we can actually prepare these type of 3D diagrams. You see, my topic was definitely use of structure in geological mapping, sedimentary terrain mapping. But in the initial stage itself, I had told you that mapping doesn't mean that always that you have to create a map only. It's a colorful diagram it's not a map. Map means you have to interpret that structure also clearly, and your map, when I show you, all things can be interpreted from map itself. So unless you are not able to define it with the help of some cross section and 3D diagrams, this 3D diagram, what I had done, I had prepared different cross sections of all these areas and clubbed them together at an angle to prepare it in a 3 dimension. So like this, you can see a sole thrust is there and a imbricate, number of imbricate thrusts are also there. Next, please. Next. Okay. Now another case study. I'll just take some maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Okay. Now this one is actually from Pranhita Godavari Valley of the Pakhal Basin, over which your Gondwana basins are also present. These Pakhals near to the Khammam district. Next, please. So I'm not showing you the whole of the mapped area. This area we had taken up for a G2 item actually for iron ore. This one was actually been taken up because there was a division in the state of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. And after that division, the Telangana government was interested in fixing up a steel plant here. So earlier also mapping was done in this area, and they have identified that in this particular part, what I'm showing you in this here, 2 red zones you are able to see. The light brownish colored one is your, or say the yellowish brown part, what is there, that is your quartzite. Then this red one is your hematite band, and then followed by quartzite, then shale, then quartzite, and topped by a red colored, the top part, it's your hematite there. Only in this one particular hill, this particular hill is called as Bayaram Gutta. This particular hill is only having 2 bands of hematites. That is two hematite bands were there. But if you go further towards the northwestern side of this area, only single band, which is actually the lower band, what you are seeing here, in a just like a ear shape, what is there, that is actually continuing further to the northwestern side. So such type of thing is there, but interpretation was not been defined. Some people said that it was eroded altogether. But even if it is eroded, we had seen that after erosion, these hematites were found to be lying at the bottom part. But if you go to the northern part, we do not see that much of eroded hematites. What one should expect if the whole upper part has been eroded. Next, please. So while doing the mapping, the upper part where the upper hematite band was there, were there. We have seen these type of folds were there. You can notice this quartzite. It's a large amplitude quartzite fold is there. Very thick bedded quartzites are there. You can easily identify the left side, the beds are dipping to the left, and to the right side, it is dipping towards the right. Next, please. So these type of folds are there. Further, you can notice there, this syn form is there by a dotted line. You can notice my field partner is actually sitting in the core of that syn form, raising his both the hands. You can notice there, and it's a large syn form in the quartzite. It's a very well developed one. Just below that, when you're coming, you can even see where the quartzites are not that much thick. That is, they're actually intercalated with some shale. You can see tight overturned folds are also present here. The left side photograph I'm showing you, tight overturned folds are also there. Next, please. Okay. Now, in the map when I was showing you, there was a basement, granitic basement over which quartzites were lying. Then some shaly layers were there, and then the upper hematites were there. The shale which is below is totally undeformed. The quartzites which are there, they are totally undeformed. But the uppermost quartzites I've just now shown you, they're all deformed. The thick quartzites are also showing folding. The intercalated quartzites are also showing foldings, right? Tight to isoclinal folds are there. But if you come down from the upper part of the hill, at one of the areas, you will be seeing these type of folds. Are you able to notice in the left side photograph, some of the folds are showing the axial plane, which is directed, which is verging towards the left side, whereas the other fold is verging towards the, this one is verging, both are verging actually towards the left side, but the fold styles you notice, the axial plane orientations are totally different. One is dipping towards the right side, the left one is dipping towards the right side. The right side fold is actually dipping towards the left side. The axial plane I'm talking. The axial plane is dipping towards the left side. And you also see the tightness of the fold. Then there is another dotted line I have shown you. Beyond this, the bottom rocks are not at all folded. They're not folded. They're all undeformed. When you go to the right side photograph again, you see the white dotted line I have shown you. Below this, it's undeformed. You can even notice this quartzite band. This is all undeformed type, horizontal. But above it, you can notice folding is there. Next, please. Now you see, again, you are seeing a vertical fold. Earlier, we were seeing inclined fold and those things. Now here you are seeing a vertical fold. You see the arrow is indicating your fold axis. Then just near to that, you are seeing an upright fold. Just near to the vertical fold, you are seeing upright fold on the right side. See the tightness of the fold. It's an isoclinal fold. You are seeing isoclinal fold and various type of fold patterns you are able to see. These are all disharmonic folding. And the lines which I have shown you, those were all detachments actually. In detachment zones, which you can even get in a thrust zone also, they're very common. In detachment zones, you will be seeing some disharmonic folding. Folds are not following each other. They will be having differences within the fold patterns all through. So next one. And just below that, there I was saying that shales were there. They're showing these SC fabrics. You can see large SC fabrics are present, showing this shearing. They indicate the sense of the movement. After this shearing, when you come further downward, you do not see any deformation in the shale part. Just next, please. Shale or the further bottom part, the lowermost quartzite, they are totally undeformed. Next, please. Yeah. In the shale part, you are able to see shale or somewhat philitic shale type of rock. These are. You are able to see bedding parallel shearing, not shearing, bedding parallel silicon sites. You are able to see. If you measure them and plot it on a stereo net, you will come to know that the movement of these silicon sites are actually similar or same as that of the SC fabric, what I've shown you in the last photograph. They're all same. So they indicate that some movement has happened definitely because of the thrusting. The upper layer has come up. So that's why in that one particular hill, we are able to see two bands of hematites, whereas in the other hills, we are not able to see the other band. Next, please. So like this, we have determined that it's not a single uh, stratigraphy. It's not a normal. It's a thrusted type of one. And based on that, we have interpreted that the same stratigraphic sequence has been overriding the other one. So similarly, you can even get these type of things. One of the thing what I have when I was discussing about anomalies, I was talking about two antiforms coming together or juxtaposing. So this is another type of a photograph what I'm showing you. Two antiformal hills are there. In between, I should have expected that the right side of the antiform, there I should have expected a synform of that much width also. But there I'm getting an antiform. So that actually indicates that interpretation can be done with this sketch actually, that thrusting has happened, which is also called as the out of syncline thrust. So thank you very much. I stop here. If you have any questions, you can ask me. I hope I was audible throughout the lecture, apart from some minor hiccups.
All are requested to ask question if they have any doubt, please.
Just a minute. I'm not able to hear you.
Hello.
I'm just rejoining. Please give me 1 minute.
Okay.
Hello. Am I audible?
आवाज थोड़ा सा ब्रेक हो रहा है आपका.
कोई नहीं, लेक्चर तो हो गया.
हाँ हाँ no, अभी क्लियर है.
एक okay,
It's okay now. It's okay.
Yeah. So you are requested to ask questions if you have any.